welcome to the Own Your Epic podcast. My name is Jay Dostal, author of the book Own Your Epic, Leadership Lessons in Owning Your Voice and Your Story. In this podcast, I highlight the stories and voices of educators across the country who are making a difference in schools and uncover what makes them exceptional leaders in their field. By sharing the voices and stories of others, we can all learn to appreciate that each of us is the author of our own epic and our experiences are relatable to others, if we are willing to share them. Let's get started on the Own Your Epic process. Welcome to the Own Your Epic podcast. My name is Jay Dostal, and I am excited about this episode because it's something that I've never done before. We've got the triple threat. Triple threat. That means we've got 3 people on this podcast. So hopefully they don't gang up on me, but rather than introduce them myself, I'm going to have them introduce themselves and tell us who they are and what they do.
I'm Lois Rasgorshek. I'm an assistant principal at Westside High School, teaching and learning curriculum, ACT, all kinds of good stuff.
I'm Jennie Benning. I'm a dean of students here at Westside High School as well.
I'm Sarah Schau, and I'm an assistant principal at Westside High School.
So some of you will probably notice that Sarah is a repeat guest. She's the first repeat guest on the podcast. However, I told her that, because she was trying to duck out on this, I told her, no, you have to stay in here because this whole format of having 3 people on here is new and you're going to get different questions. So, ladies, I'm going to start off with just a kind of a softball. So let me tee it up for you. Okay. How did you all figure out that leadership at a school level is what you wanted to do? And any one of you can chime in at any time.
I had an assistant principal who said, "Have you ever heard about the butterfly effect?" I was like, "No." And told me about it. And he's like, "I think you would be a really good school leader." And I said, "I think you're really dumb." Because I loved the classroom. I loved teaching. And his rationale to me was, but you can have a bigger impact. You can impact more kids and you can impact staff to impact more students. And so I really feel like you're somebody that should pursue a leadership role. And then once I got started, I was like, oh yeah, this is what I want to do.
Nice. Jennie, how about you?
I think I just kind of kept falling into situations that put me in leadership roles. Initially, right out of college, I had received my curriculum and instruction degree, and a coworker of mine was going back for admin, and I was single and young, and I thought, well, let me get this out of the way before I get married and have kids. And so did my administration, and through that just continued to add things along the way and found myself just kind of excited and liked it, and so just continued to pursue it throughout my years.
I think my journey happened slow. No surprise to anyone, I was labeled bossy when I was younger. So I think I needed to mature into not being bossy and being more of a leader, but I loved the classroom and I always found myself coming up with ideas and wanting to be able to create change. And I felt throughout my classroom experience that I kind of came to a halt in being able to create that change. And so after 15 years, I decided to kind of venture in to a leadership position to be able to impact more change outside of the classroom, I guess, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
It does. So I think the other fascinating thing about this is education is primarily, like teachers, is primarily a female profession. There's more females that are teachers, whereas school administration is more male dominated. And so the interesting thing about our team is we've got a nice mix of both. Why do you feel like, and maybe look at it from your own perspective, why do you feel like females maybe shy away from these types of positions? Or are they not shied away, they just aren't given the same type of opportunities?
I've talked with a friend of mine a lot about this. And I find myself like, I think as women, we often are expected or do a lot of things at home, and it takes a lot of time. And I think sometimes the fear or just the unknown of balancing both home and work in a leadership role. Teacher is safe, you get done at the same time every day, you kind of just do the same routine things, whereas administration is, are required for more, and so it's harder to balance home and work.
Yeah, I was going to say, I didn't get into administration until my girls were in middle school. And so I had done all of because it is, being a mom was the most important thing to me. But when they were at those ages, I felt like I could take this next step and still be a good parent, still be there for them. They didn't need me in quite the same way.
I just had this conversation with my daughter. I have a daughter and a son, and I think gender roles are still real. I know it's 2023, but the pressure on especially my son to feel like he needs to make money as he's entering into college and choosing a major, there is a lot of pressure on young men to make money and be the head of household. And so I think that men make the jump to administration faster for that reason. And of course, not to generalize, that's not true for everybody, but as a female who I was married when I became a teacher, I didn't have that financial pressure. And so that's why it took me 15 years to get into administration, because I didn't feel that I needed to make a lot more money. Does that make sense? I hate to even verbalize that, but I think for a lot of women.
Well, I don't think it's necessarily gender specific on that, because I got into administration because my wife was pregnant. We were going to have a kid, and I needed to make more money because my wife was working for the state of Nebraska, making in Health and Human Services, making less than what a starting teacher is, if that's possible. But yeah, I went in there because the nature of education is you get the degrees get you more money, whether or not you're going to use it or not. I had no intention of getting into school leadership. I was perfectly content teaching and coaching because that's what I thought I wanted to do. But then once I got in the classes, I was hooked. So, all right, now I'm gonna shift gears on you because this is like the best part of it. So part of the Own Your Epic process is to curate and cultivate these stories that kind of help define the path that you've been on. All right. So I'd kind of like to hear from each of you. Maybe we'll just start with one kind of personal story if you want to share, like that kind of helped grow you, but then also maybe one school story that you've experienced in your administrative careers that are like, oh my gosh, this really kind of changed me in how I lead and that sort of thing. It could be student related, could be staff related. You can go in any order. It's all about storytelling. You drawing a blank?
I'm thinking.
You're thinking.
I think about a mom that when I was a dean, probably my first or second year as a dean, that came in and her daughter had done something. Her daughter was a freshman, 15-year-old little girl. And mom came in to meet with me, and she was mad at her daughter because it was mom's birthday. And mom was turning 30. And I was like, I just sat and did that math in my... I don't do math, we all know. But I was like, this is a mom that's turning 30. Her daughter's... She had this girl the age her daughter is now. And just to frame like what I was like at 15 and what I was like at 30, and just... When people come into your office or families or whatever, you always have to just think about, they don't know anything about my background. I don't know anything about theirs. And just, you have to be so open. You just have to take people where they are and go from there. You can't ever assume anything about anyone. And the mom was great and her daughter was great. It was fascinating when I was like, no way, are you? And she's like, oh yeah, I got pregnant my freshman year of high school. And like, you just... The more you know about people, the more you can understand them.
Okay.
I can jump in. This is my first time in leadership. I was put into a position when I was really young. And many of the people of whom I was leading were older than me.
Yeah, how old are you when you got that? How old were you when you got that leadership
probably
position?
27,
Okay.
28. And I was also a part of a leadership group through the state of Nebraska. And that was when 360 leadership was popular. And so I asked my group of people, like, hey, let's do this 360 evaluation of me. I was all excited to get the information back. And I learned really quickly that be careful what you ask for because you're going to get it. And it hurt. I mean, I got a lot of positive feedback, but we never think of that as humans. We always look at the negative and the areas for growth. And I'm not kidding. I probably cried for 2 days. And it was a big changing point in me as a leader, because for the first time I was very reflective and introspective. And I guess I learned that I led the way I was taught to lead by leaders before me. So it was very authoritarian and that sort of a thing. And it didn't work, right? And I learned that through this 360 evaluation. And while it was a big ego blast, I look back at it and I reread it often, because it's good to have an ego check every once in a while.
Yeah, I started my career at an alternative school, which was very interesting, where our school was set up where we had 2 paras or educational assistants for each room. So it was one teacher with 2 EAs. And where I was at, most of the EAs at that time, if not 98% of them, were all older than me. And so I learned very quickly when I had a para that was, I would say, in her 60s, and related very well to the students, was in my room. It was humbling and a great learning experience on how to work with adults. And I've always believed since that day we should ask rather than tell a command. So rather than telling one of my EAs or a paraprofessional to do something, I always ask, in hopes that most of the time people will agree to do what you're asking of them, or at least ask for help if they don't want to do it. So I think that's one of the things that I really take from that time.
So let me circle back to something, because all 3 of you shared stories about, these things that have impacted the way that you lead. I want to talk about assertiveness, especially as female leaders. And I've talked with all of you at one point or another about assertive and being able to provide feedback to people who maybe aren't willing to accept it, and how to deliver that. I mean, I know you all are very kind individuals, but how does that assertiveness play into your leadership? How does that look for you? Is it difficult for you?
You can be kind and assertive, and it's hard because people expect you to be kind. And it's hard. I think about, Sarah's talking about, and Jennie, when you're younger, people don't take you as seriously.
It's just interesting, because as you say that, there's this common misperception that if a guy leader is being assertive, he's playing that role of being a leader. But if a woman who's a leader is assertive, they get labeled as a bitch or something like that. And so how does, because I don't have that conceptual knowledge, how does that play into your leadership and how you address difficult situations?
There are some people that are just, you're going to have that conversation, and the minute you turn around or walk away, they are running their mouth to their department or to their friends about you. And you just have to, it's hard. You have to get over the fact that people are going to say rotten things about you because they don't like that you approached or you addressed whatever.
Which is a lesson in leadership by itself, because you're not going to please everybody. But I'm just wondering, from that female perspective, does that hit you even harder? Like, if somebody is talking behind my back after I have a conversation, it's like, oh well, whatever. I shrug it off. But I think that has a lot to do with the fact that I'm a man in a leadership position. Does it bother you more? How does that impact?
You need to remember you're also talking to 3 women who have empathy very high.
Are you saying that I don't have empathy?
I'm saying you don't
Number
have it very
34.
high. So I do think it's twofold, because we three, that's what we all have in common, are very empathetic leaders. And so we are able to put ourselves in other shoes. Not that you can't. I don't mean that you can't, Jay. But for us, it's we lead by emoting. And so, yeah, it is hard. And it is a double standard sometimes, not with everybody. But I know that I'm being called a bitch behind my back when I'm super assertive. And I know that if my husband said the same thing to the same people, it would be different. And it's hard. And you just have to reflect and really try to rationalize that is the reality that we live in. And I mean, all of us just try to really put ourselves in their shoes when we are being direct and kind of explain the why, and hope that works a little bit.
I think we all try to be very kind. We try to soften as much as we can, but still make the point. And sometimes I think as a woman, people are like, are you being serious with me right now? Like, you almost have to frame a conversation like, you almost need to tell sometimes, say, I need to have a conversation with you. And people, about this, or I need to have a conversation with you. Not a big deal. We just needed to talk about something. You have to know the person a little bit to be able to frame it, but to let them know, like, this is a conversation. I need to address this with you. And yeah, I'm serious. And sometimes for some people, you do just have to come in hot. Like, I hate doing that. I will lay awake at night thinking, I have to have this ugly conversation with this person tomorrow. And I've tried kind, and now I just have to come in and say, listen, this has to stop, or you need to do this. And it's direct, and it's not comfortable, because you know what their perception is, that you're being a bitch.
Jenny, what about you?
I definitely think I'm still wet behind my ears when it comes to this conversation. It's only my second year in leadership here at Westside, and my third year here at Westside as an employee. And so for me, I just, I've always in my leadership classes, I always, they taught us that you should observe for the first year and then kind of make changes after that. And so for me, this is my third school district as well, so I've always kind of taken that approach everywhere I've gone. And I like to build my confidence as well as my relationships, so that hopefully those hard conversations are easier. But in this role, I just feel like I haven't fully got there. I know it's coming, and so this year's going to be a challenge for me. I know it's a weakness of mine, and so just gaining that confidence and having a great team is helpful.
So what advice then do you have for, whether it's females going into leadership or just people in general, about having those difficult conversations, being assertive? What's the best? Sarah, you already said it. You need to emote a little bit more, which is what I need to do. So I appreciate the feedback. No, but what advice do you have? Because you've obviously been through those conversations. You've had some that were successful. You had some that flopped, and you always want to fail forward. What's the best advice you have for people on actually having the conversation?
I think, and I learned young from Don Gilpin, the best mentor I ever had, is that relationships are key to everything, personal and professional. And the more we get to know each other, those conversations become easier, because you get to know them as a person. So, difficult conversation with person A is going to be different than with person B, and that's what makes it authentic and powerful, versus what we call no shoplifting signs, where you have the same conversation with everyone, and it isn't really tailored to the individual. But yeah, relationships are key, I think.
And I guess I would just say believing in yourself. I think sometimes we just always second guess, or I second guess myself a lot, and just going with the instinct in my gut and kind of just pushing forward, even though it's hard sometimes.
And I think we are really fortunate on our team that if you know there's a difficult conversation coming up, talking with somebody else about, I need to talk to this person, and just kind of talking through it, almost practicing it, so that you're hitting the right points, you're sure you're addressing it the right way. And after those conversations happen too, we're all very reflective. on like, hey, it went like this, or I need to follow up, or, you know, we've even done things where like, I'll check in on that person later on. You know, if I had a difficult conversation with somebody, maybe Sarah's like, well, I'll just check in on them later. So we balance each other very well when it comes to how we need to have those, and the relationship piece is critical. You have to know that person.
So with that being said, and without naming names, are there conversations that you're avoiding right now? Like you can play, like I have a conversation that I need to have, but I'm avoiding, and why are you avoiding it?
The person's not here in the building yet.
Okay.
School hasn't started. I can't talk to them. And there are things that need to be addressed with staff. We're July 31st. There are things that the way the year finished last year, some of it you need to let go, but there are things that went on last year that even with changing departments this year, I know I need to have conversations with some people saying, hey, I want you to know about this. I've spoken with whoever your new evaluator is. This is something they're going to be looking for. And kind of setting them up for, hey, you need to know that we're still going to work on this, or this is still a change that needs to happen just because I'm not your direct supervisor. This still needs to happen. So it's getting everybody back here to the building and then saying, hey, and they can be quick. Nothing is super negative, but just, hey, gentle reminder, even though I'm not your direct person, this is still going to be a focus.
How about you two? You guys avoiding any conversations?
No, nothing specific comes to mind. I mean, as I reflect last year, I think that was great practice for me in some areas of trying to have difficult conversations. And it didn't always go as planned, and that's okay. That's how you learn and you grow from it. And so as I think about this upcoming year, I would say not necessarily difficult, but just new conversations would be with the department that I'm evaluating too.
And I was thinking, I don't know that I'm really avoiding any. I think if I've gotten better at anything as I've gotten older, it's having these difficult conversations. And one thing I don't want to get lost in all of these answers is that all of us have been on the receiving end of these as well, right? So I feel like, again, as someone who has empathy high, I remember those conversations, and I remember what didn't feel good and what felt icky when I was on the receiving end. And so I'm really intentional on trying to make sure that whoever I'm having the conversation with isn't feeling that way. And also, just because we're an admin doesn't mean that other people aren't going to come to us and have difficult, where we're still the recipient. Right. And so we continue to be the recipient of those uncomfortable conversations. And I think how we respond as leaders is almost more powerful than when we're leading those conversations.
Well, I think that's a sign of a good culture, because we've talked about this, that none of us is beyond reproach.
Right.
And if you have built up a culture in your building where people feel comfortable coming to you, whether it's by title or position, whatever, and feel comfortable enough to come and tell you, I didn't like what you said here. I think a lot of times people equate difficult conversations with like negativity or anger or frustration.
Right.
It might just be and keeping it into the I feel statements, like, Sarah, when you did this, it made me feel like this. It's intent versus impact. That was not your intent, but it impacted me. And I think being able to have those conversations and just being, as we talk about it here at Westside, about punching the shark, we all have sharks. The question is, why are we avoiding having that conversation? And I think that is one of the big keys to successful organizational cultures, especially in large schools, is being able to have those conversations without it necessarily being personal.
Being personal or being punitive.
Right.
Because they're not.
You can still be kind.
Yeah.
But Lois, when you did this, it made me feel, oh, okay. Because when you know better, you can do better. Right. So because we've talked a lot about like the gender roles in leadership, which is why I wanted to have all three of you, the ulterior motives here. What advice do you have for people who are coming in to the teaching profession? because it's a very different world than when you all were coming in. We've come out off the back end of a pandemic. How has it changed? What advice do you have for people? Because it's not like we have a pipeline of people banging on our door to get in here.
Right.
Why is this such a great profession? Why would you promote it to somebody? What should they be prepared for?
Because every day is different. And every day you have opportunities with kids. And if you don't know any high school, middle school kids right now, you need to, because they're amazing and they're fascinating. And you have the opportunity to education. Yes, there's content. You can't love your content. You have to love kids first. And so if you want to be a part of change and seeing children in society grow and develop into the kind of human beings that you want to have around you in the world, go into education.
That is such a nice answer. Like, I would not have given it. Lois, I mean, you have a way of putting things in, like, there's no way I can put that in those terms. Jennie, Sarah, what do you think?
I was going to say rewards. The daily rewards that you get from, much like Lois, that you get to see, whether it's small, whether it's large. The reason I say rewards is there was a summer where I didn't teach summer school early on. And I remember I was young by myself at the time, and July hit, and I was struggling a little bit mentally. And I called it my reverse seasonal depression, because it was July and I needed something to uplift me, and I needed something to get me going for the day. And so I often think about that month that was a little tough because I didn't have much going on. So just the rewards that students give you.
I've been really reflective about this, sending a kid to college. What I feel as though my husband and I have really prepared Gavin, but so many of his life lessons he has learned from his teachers and coaches. And so I try to be, if I could speak to a bunch of up and coming teachers, I would just tell stories of how teacher after teacher helped mold my kids. I'm going to cry. But truly, like, things that thank you.
I'm recognizing that emoting, and I'm giving you tissues.
You're good. Just so much that our children don't even listen to their parents about, and not disrespectfully, they just don't. But teachers are just such an important part in the development of our kids and just the lessons.
Well, the development of us. Like, I think about the teachers that impacted me and how they impacted me. I'm like, I can give you names and exactly what they did or said, and it might not. Generally, it wasn't the lesson of the day.
Right.
Generally,
it never is.
It never is. It was something else that you learned in a different way that was a life lesson that was more important.
Yeah.
Sorry, my AirTag is going off for some odd reason, but I apologize for that. All right, so
the life of an educator.
I know, right? So we are, believe it or not, we're at 27 minutes. Like, we're at the end of this, but I've got to ask you all this question just because Sarah already answered it, but I've got to ask you again. Maybe she'll have another opportunity. We have talked about white belt issues. You all know what white belt issues are. They're the ones that just set you off. I won't go into the details of how it came up with white belts, but it has something to do with golf and not being very good at golf, but you're wearing a white belt, you must be pretty special. So I want to ask each of you what your white belt issue is in schools. The thing that just grinds your ears, like when you see it, like, oh my gosh, really?
I can go first. My biggest white belt issue in schools is truly just adults, and this is any not adults in general, like any adult that works inside a school that truly does not enjoy kids. Mm-hmm. It's like, you could probably get paid a lot more to do something else. Why are you coming into a building with 2,100 kids when it's clear that you hate kids? That's my white belt issue in schools.
Okay.
Most don't. It's just a handful.
That's a good one.
Yeah, it is.
An obvious one.
And I honestly was kind of on the same lines of just like adults that can't relate or antagonize youth, and it's frustrating when we think about trauma and different things our kids have gone through, and not pausing and just getting to know that individual and the relationship, building it with that student. I feel like that's kind of like the white belt. You're too good to truly take time to find out what the concerns are.
Mine is going to jump together right with both of those. Hold on, I have a picture of it here. Nope, not that one.
It is a podcast, Lois, so they're not going to be able to see the picture.
Never say, I had to read it, okay? Never say that's not my job. We have teachers and people in buildings that say that's not my job. It uses arrogance and laziness. Chip in to help with what needs to be done, even if it's not your responsibility. Do what needs to be done or help someone find the solution, even when nobody's watching.
I love that.
Mic drop.
Mic drop.
Yeah.
I think
I had to find the quote, sorry.
it's important because we can fall into the trap in education of saying, that's not my job. Kids in crisis, you don't necessarily know who that kid is or what. It'd be very easy to just walk by the kid who's crying and not say anything to him, and just because that's not my job, I'm not a counselor, or I'm not an English teacher, so I don't teach reading or writing or whatever. It's all of our job. I mean, if you work in this building, if you work in a school, everything's your job. And if you're not willing to accept that, this may not be the best place for you. Now, you can say that in a kind way. It's just a matter of actually saying it. And I think those are some of those difficult conversations that I've shared with you, that we've got to develop a culture where we can actually have those conversations with saying, you know what, this isn't the right place for you. I had somebody do that to me very early on by saying, elementary is not the right grade level for you. They said, middle school, probably not the right grade level for you. High school, right on board. And you guys know me well enough to know why those conversations happen. But I think having somebody be honest with you and forthright with you and sharing that, I think is really important. And so we are at the end of time. Thank all three of you for doing this. This is the triple threat. These three ladies are phenomenal. I'm glad that they're on my team. And because they bring a perspective that I can't necessarily have. And they also put me in my place too, because they're not afraid to come and tell me if I'm saying or doing something wrong, or I'm not emoting, I'm not showing my empathy, because I have it. It's just buried a little bit, and it needs to come out every now and then. But thank you all again for spending this time with me. That's the end of this podcast. Head on over to ownyourepic.blogspot.com. Check out all the latest blogs and past episodes of the podcast, and we'll see you all next time. Thank you for joining me on today's podcast. To find out more about Own Your Epic, check out my website at ownyourepic.blogspot.com, where you can purchase my book or subscribe to all the latest blog and podcast updates. Until next time, own your epic and share your voice and your story. It matters and can make a difference in the lives of others.